All right, here we are again for social studies. I hope you're learning a lot as we review how our government was created. We started with the weak articles yesterday. We looked at how they created a weak government and how Shays' Rebellion really opened the eyes of people, even George Washington, to how we need to strengthen our government and make a better government. And so we ended yesterday's lesson with a decision to meet again as the Congress and change the Articles of Confederation, improve our country's government. So today's lesson talks about just that. It's called the Runaway Convention. We know that they had the Constitutional Convention when they decided to change the Articles of Confederation. So let's get started with this reading today. Runaway Convention. First of all, let's make one thing clear. The convention, which gathered in Philadelphia in the spring of 1787, was originally called to strengthen the Articles of Confederation, not replace it. 12 of the 13 states sent delegates to the event. Rhode Island did not. A total of 55 men attended the convention, and only 39 of those 55 men would eventually sign the document. Some of the men who came to the convention had been there when the Declaration of Independence was written 11 years earlier. George Washington of Virginia was there. So was Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania. So was Roger Morris of New York, the richest man in America, and the man who had helped pay for the cost of the Revolutionary War. However, there were some important people absent, such as Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Samuel Adams, and John Hancock. Many weren't there because they had other jobs to do. Jefferson, for instance, was in Europe working as U.S. Minister to France. However, some important people refused to come because they didn't want the federal government made more powerful. Patrick Henry refused to attend, saying he smelled a rat in Philadelphia, tending toward the monarchy. Remember, Patrick Henry said, "Give me liberty or give me death." So he smells a rat in Philadelphia. He thinks they're going to give the government too much power, tending toward the monarchy. The monarchy is like a king or queen. So he thinks they're trying to set up a government just like England's with a king. So he didn't go because he didn't like it. The first person to arrive in Philadelphia had been too young to attend the Continental Congress in 1776 and too unhealthy to fight in the Revolutionary War. His name was James Madison, and he was only 5 feet 4 inches tall. Some of you were probably as tall as he was when he was a grown man. And he weighed only about 100 pounds. Madison was a very smart man who'd been to Princeton University. Like many of the other delegates, he had spent much of his life reading books and articles by people such as Hobbes and Rousseau. Hopefully you'll learn more about them in future grades. While other delegates were still arriving, Madison wrote down a proposal for a new government to replace the Articles of Confederation. His suggested form of government consisted of 3 branches. Are you working on your 3-branch tree for extra credit? Here's you some more facts. A legislative branch, which makes the laws and consists of 2 different bodies, the House and the Senate. An executive branch, which enforces the laws and is led by one person, the president. A judicial branch, which runs the court system, interprets the laws, and is led by a group of judges called the Supreme Court. Madison's plan would eventually be adopted, which is why he is known as the father of the Constitution. But there would be a lot of debates and compromises along the way. We now know that there were at least 600 separate votes taken at the Constitutional Convention, which lasted for 4 months. However, there were no reporters in the room when the convention met, so we don't know all the details about who proposed what and who argued what. The biggest compromise had to do with the makeup of the legislative branch. Madison originally thought that each state would have a number of delegates in the legislature based on the size of its population. States with more people should have more delegates. However, small states such as New Jersey and Delaware did not like this idea. They wanted each state to have the same number of delegates regardless of its population. An agreement was worked out under what became known as the Great Compromise. The Senate would have 2 delegates for each state, regardless of its size, while the House would have a number of delegates for each state based on its population. Remember, that's the Great Compromise. Another argument had to do with how the population of a state would be figured. States in which there were few or no slaves didn't think slaves should count in population. States in which there were a lot of slaves, such as Virginia and Maryland, wanted slaves to count. Again, a compromise was worked out under which a portion of the number of slaves were counted. This became known as the Three-Fifths Compromise. Many of the delegates at the Constitutional Convention believed strongly that no branch of government should be too powerful. They worked into the Constitution a system known as checks and balances. If one branch of government tried to become too powerful, another branch could check it and ensure that the government was balanced and fair. Under the Constitution, for instance, the legislative branch would have the power to write and approve laws by simple majority vote of both of its chambers. But the executive branch would have the power to reject or veto them. The legislative branch could then override the veto so long as enough members of both of its chambers voted to do so. Another example of checks and balances would allow the president to be removed from office by the legislature. However, this would require two steps: an impeachment from the House and removal from the Senate. Finally, the Constitution was set up so that changes known as amendments could be added to it. So, the Constitutional Convention was a massive, massive thing where they had a lot of issues to resolve. They're planning the government of a country. Major decisions were made, and they did a really good job, with maybe the exception of not ending slavery then. They set up a great government. And the government that they set up that we just read about is still the one that we have in our country today in 2020. Now, there's been 27 amendments made over the years, little changes for the good for our country. But when they created the Constitution, they made a way for that to happen. So they even thought ahead, thinking ahead to the year we live in now. And so it was a great, great plan. James Madison, father of the Constitution, very small and very smart man, had a wonderful plan. With a lot of compromising, everyone finally agreed. And it's still our country's government today. An amazing fact. One of the things that makes us the greatest country in the world. All right, you'll have some questions today. Now, on the next slide, you can go back and reread this text on your own and find the answers to the questions. Do a good job, make a good grade. Go back and find that evidence in the text so you can make a 100. We'll see you later.